Jason Aldean, Full Throttle Tour 2025, powered by Patriot Mobile. When lights come on. Friday, September 19th, Wells Fargo Arena. With Nate Smith. You set my world on fire. And Ray Lynn. Jason Aldean. On sale now at iowaeventcenter.com. Jason Aldean Live.
We're back and stronger than ever. TPI Composites is bringing jobs back to Iowa, building the future of clean energy with the power of wind. Wind powers the world. And here in Iowa, it powers growth, jobs, innovation, and opportunity for generations to come. When we build here, we fuel something bigger, a cleaner future, a stronger workforce, a legacy that will last. TPI Composites. We're back, Iowa, powering the world.
Scott Dochterman. Chad Leistikow. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. A special Tuesday edition of Legends and Listeners on this Tuesday morning from the Channel Seed Studios, only on Iowa Everywhere. My name is Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. Clearly a company man today with the GameDay Men's Health shirt. Scott Dochterman of The Athletic joining me, our 81st episode together. Scott, where he decided to roll early this week for a lot of good reasons, in part to help preview the Big Ten SEC Summit. Does it have a name? Does it have a name, or is it just a meeting, or what?
I just call it the Big Ten SEC Summit,
okay.
Which is, it's kind of like, you hope it doesn't end up like some other situations I've compared this to in the past, but no, it doesn't have a name.
Okay.
We'll call it I'd be embarrassed if it was.
We'll call it the Big Ten SEC Summit, and Scott will be attending it in New Orleans for the next 3 days, so we will preview that here in a bit. We're going to dig deep into not only my lengthy piece on Fran McCaffrey's future and Beth Goetz's big decision ahead, but we'll also have a little fun with an exercise that will allow us to kind of look back at the 15-year Fran McCaffrey era at Iowa. Those things shortly, but first, it's fresh, so let's start with women's basketball, because the Iowa women played a rare President's Day game at 11 a.m. Against Ohio State. Saw their 6-game losing streak come to an end, Scott, 86-78 in overtime. But, man, they made an unbelievable run to get to overtime. So for me, it's kind of one of those games that I come away with like, yeah, you kind of didn't play the greatest, but you got to overtime against the eighth ranked team in the country on the road. But at the same time, man, so close, and even held the lead briefly in overtime, but lost it.
It's a combination of a lot of feelings. I think you're right, and I think part of it is there are no moral victories, and so you're in the Big Ten. Moral victories are out the door when it comes to this. You're a competitive program. However, you can take away a lot of lessons from this, and I think primarily the lesson is you're pretty good. If you can go on the road and play Ohio State like this, you're a pretty good team. So there's no need to feel, like you're slighted. But you also feel like you let an opportunity slip away. But guess what? In the first half, it didn't look like you're going to have an opportunity to let it slip away. So you put yourself in position to go to overtime, but then you got foul trouble and inconsistent officiating kind of kept you away from being able to close the deal. So I think you take it for what it is, which is you lost, you played hard, you played competitively with one of the best teams in the country, and it also shows you that some of your depth really needs to take a couple steps forward right now. I think the freshmen are talented, and they're going to get there, but today they needed them to come through, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I came away with this too, actually, Scott, big picture-wise. Like, I really feel pretty good about the starting five. Now, Taylor McCabe you just kind of have to live with the fact that some games when you have a 3-point shooter, sometimes they're going to get loose for 4 or 5 threes, like she did at Nebraska. Some games you're going to get one, like Gabby Marshall was famous for that. She would go 1 for 2 and play 37 minutes, and that's okay. That's okay. The key is what those other players do, and I like what Lucy Olson brings to the table, obviously. I mean, she ends up with 27 points, 15 of those coming in the final 6 minutes of the game, 1 minute of regulations, 5 of overtime. Hannah Stuelke, hasn't been like on lately, but still, obviously, you feel good about her. Sydney Fulcher is just playing like a maniac right now on the board. She had 15 more boards on Monday, double-double. She's definitely playing like a girl who's a senior and seeing the hourglass kind of run out there. We've got, how many times have we seen that in Iowa men's basketball? I mean, to me, Aaron White's the prime example of that. But we'll get to that. We'll get to Aaron White later on. I feel like this is not the first reference. And then Kylie Feuerbach, played really well in the second half offensively, and she always brings good defense. So you're right. Now, Aaliyah Guyton did some nice things on Monday, but she's been very inconsistent lately. Tegan Mullaney, pulled down a ton of boards, but also had a ton of costly turnovers. Ava Hayden isn't playing right now, and Taylor Stremlow really didn't play much. Eddie O'Grady gives you a little something, but you're right. I think I do feel like one of those freshmen, probably most likely Guyton, probably needs to take a big jump here to maybe help this team. Or maybe it's time for Jensen to, give Hayden a little bit more of a shot, because she looked good in that little brief stint at Nebraska. O'Grady has been, not too productive of late. You don't want to mess with what's working, but still, there's still some searching to do here as he hit the home stretch.
I think what has worked for them during their win streak, the 6-game win streak that was snapped on Monday, was that they, instead of trying to play sometimes Hannah at the 4 and then O'Grady at the 5, they just decided to make it more of a rotation between the two of them, which cut out Ava Hayden. That's unfortunate. I thought they could have used maybe a little bit more of Ava Hayden at times. I think I think today would have been a good day for that too. Because there was you had so many foul outs that you probably could have, even though, with Hannah Stuelke, you probably could have either A, given her more minutes to Addison O'Grady, or B, inserted Ava Hayden at a couple of junctures. But that said, I don't think her impact will be negligible. I think when you're looking at, Taylor Stremlow at times looked like, wow, okay, the next Kate Martin, but you're only getting 5 minutes in an overtime game. You've kind of curtailed your ability, your impact, I guess. And then Tegan Mullaney, I think she's going to be good. This is that wild inconsistency that you get. 8 rebounds, heck, that's awesome. 0 for 4, getting a block, and then, of course, 4 turnovers. But I also thought in the first half, Chad, there was a sequence there where she was right near the end of the first half. She was bringing up the ball, and she got double teamed, and nobody really came to help her out. And I'm like, she shouldn't be dribbling the ball against a press anyway. And then second of all, she's getting double teamed, and where's your help? Now, that got straightened out after halftime. But that was a situation where you kind of left a freshman who's not a real ball handler in a position to where she's going to get the ball stripped from her. It just happens. Right. So overall, we're nitpicking. This is a good team.
Yeah.
This is absolutely a good team. They lost. There's some growth that needs to take place, and some consistency, I think, that needs to take place. But other than that, I'm more confident with them after this loss than I've been after most wins, just because they went to a hostile environment against a team that is a rival in Big Ten basketball and competed for 45 minutes. And if they can do that, and they've beaten USC, and they get UCLA this weekend, when they get to the NCAA tournament, that's not going to be somebody a 1 or a 2 is going to look at when Iowa's a 7 or an 8 or a 9, and they're going to go, oh yeah, we can't wait to play them. Right. We're going to go, oh, I don't like that. Mm-hmm. And that's the way they've played over the last 7 games.
Yeah, just kind of putting a bow on this. The whole first, 15, 18 games of the season were like Jan was rolling out any kind of combination she could try to find. And I think she's basically landed on defined roles now for everybody, because you've got Lucy Olson's basically playing the whole time now, unless she's in foul trouble. And then Aaliyah Guyton will mix in at the 1 or the 2, mostly the 2. So those are your only 3, and then McCabe. So those are your 3 players at the 1 and 2. And then you got Feuerbach Stremlo at the 3. You've got a Falter and Mulaney at the 4, and that's why Sid had a little bit of foul trouble on Monday. But Sid's knee is up to the point now where she can play 35 plus. And then the platoon at the 5. So in a sense, you kind of got to give – I mean, I kind of like what they're doing. I mean, there's no more mystery like what your role is now if you're a freshman. You know what you're expected to do. And in, for example, the case of Tegan Mulaney, it's like, okay, well, Sid's going to play about 35, so we need your best 5, type of thing. And she gave good minutes other than the turnovers. So it's a learning experience. But Hawks, like you said, play UCLA on Sunday at Carver Hawkeye Arena. This is probably the best team they'll face all year. Coming off a loss to USC the other night. So that'll be, not directly coming off it, but, they're not coming into Carver unbeaten as it looked like they may at one point. So it'll be a tough one. Iowa has yet to lose by more than 10 points in a game this year. That will be tested on Sunday, but it's also another opportunity on the calendar. And the Hawks, really just got to win that last Wisconsin game. And then ideally, if they can steal one of the UCLA or Michigan games, that's going to help their postseason cause quite a bit. All right, let's move into the –
just one thing to add to that is UCLA beat Michigan State, but they did it without Lauren Betts, who's in a walking boot. So one of the best players in the country, one of the best posts, WNBA or college basketball, may or may not be able to play. And that could impact the game significantly. But they still beat Michigan State. Now, granted, it was at Pauley Pavilion, but they're on the road in a hostile environment in Iowa City, and we know what that's capable of. I would expect a pretty good performance and effort.
For sure, yeah. I'm glad you pointed that out. Let's move on to the Big Ten SEC Summit because we want to save playing time for Iowa men's basketball. What's going on here, Scott? I read your coverage at The Athletic. I read Stuart Mandel's piece also to kind of prep for this conversation, and kind of what it looks like to me. You tell me what's going on. It kind of looks like it's the Big Ten and SEC are looking to take over the college football playoff. Is that kind of what's going on here?
It has that potential. The Big Ten and SEC have they are the 2 biggest brands and forces in collegiate sports today. With all the court losses that the NCAA has incurred, it has kind of taken, there's a leadership vacuum that needs to be filled in the SEC and Big Ten by virtue of what they've done competitively and what they've done financially, that they're filling that vacuum with each other. And this summit is just another step in how they want to kind of figure out the next phase, because there's a leadership void right now, and they're filling it because they're the strongest and most powerful entities in college sports. This one in particular, I think you're going to see, maybe they won't announce it on Wednesday or anything, but I think you'll see some consensus being built on what they want to do with the CFP going forward. And I think there'll be an expansion, and I think it'll go to probably 16 teams and not 14 teams.
Really?
Yeah.
Not a fan of that. I would have been okay with 14, I guess, but 16. Here's why I don't like 16, because then, or the reason I like 14 is that you reward the top 2, which presumably would be the Big Ten and SEC champs most years, maybe not all, with a first-round bye. And I know it's not a home game. Maybe that's part of the thinking or whatever, but I feel like that extra week off, it didn't work out this year, but, it was because you had the best team was the 8th seed. So, and one of the other ones was the 7th seed, and the 2 seed was kind of flawed this year because it lost its quarterback in the SEC championship game. So I feel like you can throw some of those seeds out this year. But anyway, go ahead. 16?
Well,
I don't like 16. I hope it's not 16.
yeah, I mean, I get there's going to be discussion on should I keep it at 12 or, which I thought was a good tournament. Go to 14 or 16. But if you're going to go to 14, it's an awkward number. You're going to go to 16. And so now I'll say this, that after going to those campus sites, that's the future. I mean, it's got to be. It's different. Now the Rose Bowl was awesome. But going to Ohio State, Notre Dame, that was probably even cooler. I mean, because it was just a different type of vibe. It's probably the same as an NFL game. If you go to Soldier Field for a playoff game, a double doink game like you did or whatever, versus a regular season game, it's a different vibe. I experienced that covering the Chiefs when they played the Colts and neither team punted. I mean, the vibe and the atmosphere was out of this world. But beyond just the layout of it, the other faction is because the SEC and Big Ten now have expanded their way into having incredible depth across the board, you're going to see them position themselves to wanting to get probably 4, if they go to 16 especially, but maybe even 14, each league getting guaranteed 4 games against one another or get in the playoff. And part of that is and then in conjunction with that, the discussion of whether or not the SEC and Big Ten try to organize some sort of either annual challenge or games against one another on a consistent basis. And let me kind of walk through this on how it applies to, let's say, Iowa. Let's say that they continue to have the Iowa State series because there are 7 in-state series among the 2 conferences, between the 2. You have the Oregon, Washington, and then you have Louisville, Kentucky, South Carolina, all those. Well, if Iowa continues to have the Iowa State series, and then let's say it links up with South Carolina in an SEC game, that's 11 Power 5 conference games. What if the Big Ten, they go 7-2 in the Big Ten, lose by a field goal to South Carolina, and they're 9-3, but without a guaranteed number of teams? What if a 10-2 Big 12 team gets in there, and they didn't play near the amount of, Iowa maybe beat Penn State, loses to Ohio State, beats Iowa State, but maybe it loses, I don't know, Michigan State, something like that. Then you're looking at it going, we played this really incredibly tough schedule, but we got iced out because we were 9-3, they were 10-2. This would protect that. This would allow you to say, hey, if you're in the top 4 of your conference, in one of these 2 conferences in particular, you deserve to be in the tournament. Then, in addition, the Big 10, Big 12, and ACC would have a protected number, most likely 2, maybe, or a combination of, this is my own thought, is 5. You each get 2, and then, 1 other guaranteed. Then, then there's also the thought where this may alter championship week for the Big Ten.
Yeah. If you're going to take 2 Big 12 teams, then just don't play the championship. I mean, those championship games are silly in that case, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, for like the Big Ten, remember the Champions Week concept in 2020?
Yeah.
It would be revisited to where, I threw this out there in a couple of months ago, but this is one where instead of playing a championship game only as a separate game, you incorporate basically Champions Week into the final week of the schedule. So then you can make some of those games as play-in games. Like last year, you could have had Indiana play Illinois, and the winner maybe gets in there or something like that. So so you leave that week wide open. Maybe 1 plays 2, but 3 plays 6 or 3 plays 5 or something. You manage the schedule, and then you can do it all the way down the line where you could have 16 play 18 if they didn't play during the season or something like that. Which would be kind of fun. It would add some speculation and interest. The only thing I would say is you've probably got to guarantee 9 teams home games until 9 teams you have road games, and then have like that plot reserved. Right. So it's like, hey, if it's Thanksgiving weekend, it's going to be in Iowa City and then the usual hotel the visitors use is going to be blocked off. So stuff like that you got to make sure to do. But anyway, that's and
would that be a 13th game then, or is that a 13th game?
Like be part of the regular season.
Be part of the Big Ten schedule. So you play 8 games plus another one.
Plus, the +1.
Okay.
So last year, maybe Iowa plays Illinois last year. With 9-3 Illinois, 8-4 Iowa, or whatever it would have been before that last game. And
that'd be fun.
Yeah, it'd be different. We'd be talking about it like, God, who are they going to play in the last week?
Right.
He's still. I think that'd be cool. And then one other thing that has been discussed, and is that now everybody takes these exempt tournaments and then they pay through the nose to go play in Cayman Islands or the Cancun Challenge. Some of the ADs and the commissioners are thinking, you know what? Why do we do this? Why do we go and hand over our money and our product to some organization and then they make all the money from it when we could do it ourselves? And so there's like a thought of, why not have a 4-team classic, 2 games in Orlando run by the SEC jointly with the Big Ten, or, as part of the bragging rights challenge in St. Louis between Illinois and Missouri? Why not invite Iowa and Arkansas, and then you flip the games around? Stuff like that, where you keep all your revenue and you run it yourselves because you can run it better anyway. And that's something that's, I think, in basketball that might be looked at too.
Okay. So what's your so how many of you from the Athletic are going down there?
All of us. No, I'm kidding. 3.
It's like the combine. Okay.
No.
So what do you know? Like, are you going to be more Big Ten focused, or what's your role going to be down there?
We haven't decided on who's doing writing what yet, because we've got to kind of see what all transpires. But Ralph Russo, who used to work at the Associated Press, is there. Me and Seth Emerson, who covers Georgia and SEC, kind of the way I am with Iowa a little bit. So I might do something with a little Big Ten bent, or we may just farm out the areas. Maybe they come to certain situations that demand multiple stories, and we kind of farm it out there. But yeah, we'll be embedded in the hotel. It'll be entertaining and
nice. Okay. So, all right. Kind of like a Big Ten media days, except it's like administrators, right?
Yeah, it's just
2-3 days.
Well, it's one day that they're getting together on Wednesday.
Okay.
But it's all the ADs from both conferences, the commissioners, and they're going to try to, and there's going to be a lot of governance issues, NIL, that sort of thing. But they have to be careful in what they say, because if they come to some sort of magical agreements, like, and I'm just throwing this out there, they're not stupid enough to do this, because they said throughout, the attorneys are like, you better be careful with what you say every single time they do it. Hey, let's just pay everybody 70%, pay football 70% across the board. That's collusion. So, they may maybe on the side, a couple ADs when they're eating, whatever lovely hors d'oeuvres they're having or something like that. Maybe they'll float it out together, but it's certainly not as part of a group, because they collectively all decide 70% is the number for football. Guess what? They're going back to court and they're losing in a big time way.
Sure. Yeah. That's funny, because when I did that Beth Gets podcast, I didn't really think about it. I was like, is that something you guys discussed together? It's like, no, we can't do that. But I was like, yeah, she was pretty. I wasn't trying to set any kind of trap. Yeah. I just was dumb enough to ask it, but she was smart enough to dodge that question. So that that makes sense. But I do, I think it will be 14 to 15 million for football. I do. So anyway, I want to say that anything more on the summit before we move on to hoops.
It really, I would just say that whatever happens out of this will be very impactful at the industry as a whole. I mean, we talk about basketball and football and whatever, and the games, but this determines a lot. And again, if it comes down to the numbers, and things can change. They could say, you know what, we're not comfortable with 4. We think that's too much, 3. And maybe the SEC's thinking, we'll guarantee 3, but that means we'll have extra spots so we can have 6 more than anything. But even so, I expect there to be some sort of level of consensus. And the other factor I will say is that they do need to find a way to do it. And this is probably where guaranteed spots matter, or bowl positioning matters, is that the SEC only plays 8 league games. The Big Ten plays 9. To have some sort of a challenge would probably require the SEC to play 9 games. That the Big Ten doesn't want to go into it, saying, okay, sure, and that's your big game, and you still only play 8, and then you're 10-2, and the SEC is just too tough. It just, they need to play a similar number of major opponents in order for it to really work as a annual challenge. But if they do play a challenge, Chad, it's the biggest thing we'll see all year. It'll be as big as the playoff almost during the season, which is, can you imagine if week 1 and week 2 was SEC Big Ten Challenge, 1 week half the teams, the other week the other half. Iowa, maybe it's like the old draws that we get from the ACC Big Ten Challenge. And it's
right,
like,
yeah. Who are they going to play this year? Yeah.
Yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, is it Missouri? Is it LSU?
Right.
And then likewise, say you go to the Grove at Ole Miss, which is phenomenal. It's an awesome place. Or Death Valley at night at LSU. And then the next year they're going to come to Wave at Kinnick. I mean, these have the greatest atmospheres in football, the NFL or otherwise. Both leagues have amazing, a whiteout at Happy Valley, at Death Valley with its night atmosphere, jump around, the Kinnick Wave, the hedges, between the hedges, you've got all these great things, Neyland Stadium, just on and on. And then there's, Missouri and other places.
Rutgers versus Vanderbilt. Get excited. There's 2 extra Big Ten teams, so they'll have to work that out. I guess some years that weren't some Big Ten teams left out of like the Gavitt games or whatever. So the precedent's been set. But.
Some of and that may be in Iowa once in a while too.
Because Iowa State, right?
Because Iowa State, maybe Iowa says, "Hey, we'll bow out and play, a couple of times." But but that's also important financially for an Iowa because of what they receive from a home game. Is I used to know the number, but that's been about 10 years ago. Now it's probably close to $10 million. Between tickets and parking and everything that's associated with the game. You're giving up a significant gate, and which is why they've never really done the giving up a home game to go to a neutral site, because it's just, and then you have your people locally, what the estimated economic impact to the community for one game is so significant. You're going to really take that away from your restaurants and from your hotels and stuff, because they're your donors. Those are the people who support you. And so you're going to take money out of their pocket. You better be prepared to say, we're doing it once this year. We're really sorry. We'll hook you up doing something else.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you to GameDay Men's Health. Normally, it's mid-February. You're noticing extra pounds. You're more despondent, maybe a little less healthy feeling than usual. But this year is totally different for me in particular, because it's not a normal mid-February. I'm 9 months into my experience with GameDay Men's Health. I feel amazing. I'm thirsting for exercise every day. More importantly, I have the energy for the exercise, and I'm enjoying just how much better I feel on a daily basis. It's fun to be able to go hard and train hard, and you feel like you get the most reward for it. Obviously, we've mentioned we're getting older. I'm in my early 50s. But GameDay Men's Health truly can help you feel like you're in your 20s with their testosterone replacement therapy treatments. They're also doing great things for healthy weight loss, improve your energy, your mood, your performance at home or on the field or on the trails by partnering with GameDay Men's Health. Folks at GameDay Men's Health are awesome. They're super chill. You can meet them with no obligation to commit to anything. They'll just provide you some info, free, private. Visit GameDayMen'sHealth.com or stop by one of their locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty to learn more. And make sure to tell them that Chad and Scott from Legends and Listeners sent you. And I do hear constantly, Scott, that they really they hear about us a lot. So thank you to those that have listened to us. Hopefully it's going well for you.
Yeah, Chad, I hear about it a lot that people come in that they have listened to us, that's part of what they want to do. And take it from me. I'm now at a weight that I haven't been since I was in my 20s. I've lost close to 40 pounds since started this.
That's awesome.
And I have way more energy. I'm working out with more consistency now. And when you see the results, you feel better about yourself and you want to do more. And I would say that with changing some food habits and going through this, because it's not just you can't just walk in, take the shot, and magically become better. You got to work at it too. But I tell you what, I'm really liking what I see. And who knows what the future holds on this, as far as I can get down to a weight. Maybe since my early 20s. I don't know that I want to go to my teens yet, but but I do feel much better, and now I'm starting to look through my closet, going, all right, I can get rid of this. All right, I can wear this again. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Great to hear. Hope we love hearing from you guys too when things are going well. Let's talk Fran McCaffrey here. My piece posted on Monday morning. Been working on it for a couple weeks. It's one of those things where you gather info, you talk to as many people as you can. Just all of it's like just getting information and background. You're not like looking for amazing quotes or anything. You're just trying to learn kind of what the situation is. And everyone for months has been like, is this it for McCaffrey? They have to get rid of him, right? So my premise is to look at every factor that Beth gets is needing to look at here, because it would be a big decision if they decide to move on from their winningest all-time coach. And I felt like feedback I've gotten from it has been really terrific in terms of just like how complicated. It's not as simple, I guess, like as just fire Fran, like it's there's a lot to it. Honestly, I think the most complicated piece probably is the finances, which is hard to talk through on a podcast like this. But there is, obviously, we've talked about the $4.2 million buyout, but let's start with like just attendance. You're losing, I don't know. I think I put in my story $560,000 of year over year income and tickets and concessions and all that stuff. That doesn't count this year, obviously, so it's going to go down even more. So can you reverse that? So does that make it worth it? But then on the addition, if you bring in a new coach, you're going to have to pay his buyout potentially. And that adds up to close to 10 million if you're talking Darian DeVries, and 10 million is a lot right now because you're trying to pay athletes this coming year. And money's tight, and you got to pay a new coach. And is Fran McCaffrey really that bad? No, he's not. I mean, like he's done an amazing job at Iowa for 11 upper division finishes in 12 years coming in. I mean, it's been a tough year to watch this year, but they've also had a lot of injuries. So there's really just a lot of factors that I wrote about, Scott. Kind of what are some of the factors you're thinking about? Is either you read this piece or you're just kind of, I don't know, just kind of digging into kind of what Beth Getz should do.
Yeah, it's a topic that we've discussed quite a bit, on this podcast, in public, whatever forum we're in, on the side even, it's a popular topic, which is, start at the number one moment is, should Fran McCaffrey continue as coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes? And there are layers, and it's not easy. It's not just get rid of him, he sucks. There's, as you said, since 2012, only two programs have had one or fewer losing seasons. It's one, Michigan State and Iowa, and you said 11 out of last 12 upper division finishes. So that says that Iowa has a high floor under Fran McCaffrey, and it's because of Fran McCaffrey. And we need to paint the entire picture, which I think you did a good job in your story. And the picture is, it's complicated, and he has made it such. He gets the team to the tournament with regularity. This will be the second straight year they miss the NCAA tournament, barring some unbelievable thing that I don't think will happen. But
they get to the tournament with regularity. They win 20 games with regularity. They are at least 500 in the Big Ten with regularity. That is a high floor. That's successful, what you want. Now, like with Iowa football, an Iowa basketball situation is, how do you maximize the opportunities when you can be really good to take it to the highest level possible? And that's where he's fallen short. When you've had Luka Garza and Keegan Murray, first-team All-Americans, when you've had a collection of other players like Jordan Bohannon, who played for a long time but has a lot of records, Joe Wieskamp, who's still playing professional basketball, Chris Murray, who was a first-round draft pick. When you have a collection of players like that, can you maximize it at the highest level? And that's where Iowa has fallen short. They did win the Big Ten tournament one year. But other than that, there hasn't been that second weekend. And so why is that? And then you look at, is it play on the floor? Well, play on the floor has gotten you to that point. But as we know, games are won and lost in the final 5 minutes of competition in basketball. You've got to get stops. And Iowa has not only ranks last, and almost every year ranks last in field goal percentage defense or scoring defense, but it doesn't it hasn't changed. It hasn't decided, we're going to bring in an assistant whose forte is defense and we're going to make you miss shots. Instead, even now, granted, they were tired and undermanned, but the Maryland game saw a lot of hands down when people are shooting. You got to do better than that. Lack of closeouts, all those things. So that's the play on the floor. How I would grade Fran is a very strong B for play on the floor. Is that enough to fire the winningest coach in program history? No, it is not. Not in my opinion, not at the University of Iowa. It is enough to force him to change, like you forced Kirk Ferentz to sun out, but it isn't enough to do that. Now we flip to the other side. And this is where you can make a strong case that it has. Now people will get upset saying, hey, you need to get to the Sweet 16 or you should be fired. Okay, whatever. The business side is where you have to really look at it, because you are in the Big Ten Conference, as we said. You're expected, you're expected to fill your arena. You're expected to fill your arena with regularity, and those numbers are not the case. I mean, you have the scans, I have the scans. It's embarrassing. And it's embarrassing. It should be for everybody, but particularly the head coach, because it's an indictment of what your fans think about you. And, the average right now is 5,216 in the games. Butts in the seats. You're averaging a little over 9,000 paid tickets. So that means, without doing the percentages, I'll just try to do it on top of my head. Roughly 40% of the people who have tickets aren't going. And your arena is already at 60% filled based on the tickets they've been purchased. You got to do better than that. And so what has Fran done to bring in that engagement? I don't see anything. He hasn't gone out and, beat his hand on his chest. If he does it, he doesn't say it publicly, and you need to. So, the scans, 2,800 and change going to Minnesota. That's bad news. So I don't know, Chad. So I think you look at it I look at it from those two veins. Competitively, they're okay. Mm-hmm. That's not a reason to change. Financially, it is absolutely a reason to change. And even if it hits you in the short term, you have to do something, because it's not going to change. Because you brought back Peyton Sandfort this year. You have Owen Freeman. You have Josh Dix. Those are three of the top 25 players in the Big Ten. And you have a roster, when healthy, that's capable of contending for the Big Ten. You beat Indiana decisively at home. Yet, as we saw even with Iowa State, 80% full. Fans aren't just buying this product. And you got to evaluate the product holistically.
Yeah, the scans for the Iowa State game were like 10,600. I don't have I haven't read in front of me, but
10,696.
I mean, several thousand of those were Iowa State fans. So
yeah, they were. Yeah.
You're talking. It was a half full of Iowa fans for the Iowa State game. So no question, that's been the biggest glaring thing this year. And I know you covered the end of the Licklider era. We've talked about this a little bit. Very similar in terms of the empty seats in the arena. Now maybe there's a little bit more gusto with with a team that actually scores this year.
I'll interject just for a second. The difference I saw with that was people were more mad about the product then. They didn't like the product and they were angry about it. Right. The stands were about the same, but the difference is this program is much better on the floor than that one was. That was in really bad shape. Yeah. Other than Matt Gaten's, it was a rough product under, and that was all coach. That was Todd Licklider. Yeah. But there's apathy now that there wasn't apathy then, and that is a difference.
Yeah, and that's but here's I think one of the biggest factors though that I did put in the story, made it a pretty prominent piece of that, is that Iowa is competing with a roster that's, far less compensated than most of the teams that they're playing. I mean, they're in the low 1 million range, maybe creep up to 1.5 depending on who you ask. But that ranks, I was told, in the bottom 5 of the Big Ten, and maybe a little lower than that. So you're asking, not only this year you're trying to compete with that, but now you're talking about this from what happens next year. Because I think, if you can't raise NIL money, then that's a problem, and it doesn't seem like that they have been able to under this. Under Fran, the last couple of years. And, it's just a product of the reality of the situation. I mean, football and women's basketball are doing better. Wrestling is doing better in that area. Men's basketball right now is not. And you probably have all those sports. Well, maybe not all of them, but like men's basketball, you got to have talent. I mean, it's really hard to win without talent in basketball because you only put 5 on the floor. So, and you can do it with a couple guys. I mean, it's possible. We've seen that happen. So, so I give Fran actually a lot of credit for how he's won games, honestly, with playing with a shorter deck. I mean, playing with worse cards, basically. And he's finding ways to win. Now, this year has really been a lot of injuries. Now, there's certainly the defense has been about as bad as we've seen in a long time, but Owen Freeman's out for the year. Dix and Sanford have been, have played games this year with broken bones. Thelwell's out now. Cooper Koch was supposed to be a contributor, really hasn't done anything because of his lung injury. And so, it's been a bad set of circumstances for a team that had higher expectations for sure. So I guess on that point, Scott, my question is, that I asked in the story anyway. And I'm not, again, this story was not opinionated. This was all like, here's what Beth Goetz is looking at. All the factors she has to look at, which is how do you grade getting to overtime in the 2019 NCAA tournament in the round of 32? Because if you win that game, is the perception different? Well, you just have to weigh that. Like, does that matter or not? I mean, are you judging him because he hasn't got no Sweet 16 because they didn't win that overtime period against Tennessee? You can in some ways, but you also say, well, you're close. Maybe you get there. I don't know. Like, you just don't know how she's going to evaluate it all. But I think the one thing that's hard and fast to me, as I researched this story and wrote this story, is somehow they got to be able to raise funds, and I don't know. She has to determine if the tide can turn under this regime or if a new coach is what it'll take to get more people excited about giving their money to players and facilities, because the facility needs an upgrade too. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot there. When you start talking about finances, there's no question that they need to raise money. Now, the fact that most of it will go in-house, not all of it, but most of it is helpful. But Iowa needs to pay for it. Iowa needs to find a way to recoup that money, or completely change what it does. And it may impact other sports because it's not going to drop men's basketball, but other sports that are, take baseball. I mean, you spent more than $3 million on baseball last year, and that's one that could be impacted if you can't raise money for basketball. So you look at that now, but there's how much of this was self-inflicted though by Fran McCaffrey, by not reaching out to people or building relationships with people who would be more willing to hand out that money to support the program financially. That maybe he's just not their cup of tea. That it's not totally a blameless situation here. He's clearly an excellent basketball coach. His resume says that. He's won more than 500 career games. He'd be close to 300 at Iowa if with another season he'd get it. But does the fan base have the faith that he can do it? And people can only vote with their wallets these days. Mm-hmm. As we've seen with football, they can complain all they want about the offense, but unless they don't show up, you're not going to get, certainly under Barta, you weren't going to get any kind of, recourse. So I think this is the way that fans have spoken out. We just don't want it like this anymore.
Sure.
And I think that's got to be taken into consideration even more than the wins and losses, because the other aspect, Chad, is the Tom Davis factor. Mm-hmm. Forced out Tom Davis, and that has left everybody skittish about Kirk, about Fran, about Lisa before Megan Gustafson, Tom Brands being number 2 in the country instead of number 1. That has left a lot of people with that factor. But I'll say this, and you tell me if I'm wrong, because you were covering it for the Gazette at that time, if I recall. Mm-hmm. And that is, at that time, it was about getting to the next level. And for 10 years, after the big wave of Roy Marble and Ed Horton and all that, after they left, for a 10-year period, Iowa didn't get to the Sweet 16. Iowa win their first round game, and then they lose their second round game. And then there were a couple of years where they weren't very good. They were like 11-16. And then you lose Rafe LaFrentz, and the fan base started to get really edgy. Like, we're 10 years now. It's a whole decade of not getting to the Sweet 16. And that's what kind of forced it. And I talked to Bob Bowlesby about it a couple years ago. And he's like, the donors were revolting. And then we looked at our schedule, our home schedule. We weren't playing anybody. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? So I think it's a different situation because there was no apathy at all back then.
True. Yeah.
So at any rate, and there's a lot there. I'm throwing a lot.
Yeah. Man, yeah, we're blowing through this hour here, but it's okay. It's a good topic. Fran's a good coach. He gets the most out of his players. I feel like he's really done. He's got a great eye for talent. You talk about Keegan Murray, Chris Murray, Luka Garza. And the funny thing is, when you talk about Keegan and Chris, well, they fell into his lap. Well, he recruited them. He believed in them. Yeah. He gets credit for that. Like he got him here. Like you can't say, well, that doesn't count.
Right.
I'm sorry. It counts.
You get everything. Peter Jock, he had a torn patella tendon. He led the Big Ten in scoring.
He stuck with Peter Jock. He believed in Jordan Bohannon. Yep. Becomes one of the all-time clutch players in Iowa history. Maybe the most clutch player. Yeah. When you think about free throws, big shots after big shots, and also, the Chris Street gesture. I mean, talk about a legendary career. So, I think from the coaching aspect, terrific coach. I said excellent coach, and I don't back down from that at all. I think he is an excellent coach. He's done more with less. If you gave him Kansas's roster, for example, I think he would do he would do really, really well. But a couple of things. There's so much here. I do think that go hire the Phil Parker of basketball and say, we gotta fix this on the court. And there could be one area that could be one path forward for Fran. I feel like it seems like that's an idea that has some legs, especially if I was not ready to make a move. But who knows? Who knows if we'd want to do that? I don't know. Secondly, you talked about Davis, the Tom Davis era. Back then, like this, people were I mean, people were really excited about Steve Alford. They thought that was a great move by Bob Bowlesby. They felt, there was obviously, we don't want to kick Tom out the door at the same time, but they were really excited for Steve Alford. I mean, he was coming on at Missouri State. That gives me the same vibe a little bit as it's not the same, okay, as the Darian DeVries discussion, because that's the guy that's seen as kind of the perfect fit right now, that's out there, maybe willing to come here. Would be very costly though to go get him. You'd have to pay, more to buy out West Virginia than you have to buy out Fran, and then what NIL assurances can you make him? But the Darian DeVries thing would be, I think. That's one where Beth would have to take a long, hard look. If she somehow knew, like, oh, we could get him if we really, like, I know he would come if we made the move and offered him this, and then I think she's, got a real decision to make. But if I would say, just from researching this whole thing, I assume she's been doing her homework. That's kind of the vibe I got from her when I talked to her in Nashville. And she will have a good idea who she's going to hire, I would think, before she makes a move, is kind of my feeling. Because I think that's how you have to operate these days. You have to have at least a very, very short list of people, because you don't want to just make a change and then all of a sudden, okay, the job's open. And then all of a sudden you're, oh God, who are we going to, are we going to get Todd Lickliter again? I mean, you can't really do that either, because you got to be able to raise funds. You got to be able to win games. The Big Ten is really tough. It's just a complex thing, Scott. I can't believe we could talk about this forever. Any other little aspect? I don't want to give away my whole story either, but still at the same time, it's just a deep issue. And then the other thing at the very end of the story, if you guys read to the end, I put in a ton of examples. And here's a good example I put in there, Scott. Lovie Smith. Bears got rid of Lovie Smith after a 10-6 season. Not that none of these are exactly the same, but they've not found the right coach since. That happens. It happens a lot in college athletics. You think about, look at Notre Dame right now. Their coach is a disaster. He just went on a tirade the other day.
Look at Iowa basketball.
Yeah, exactly. You've got your own example.
Yeah. You made everybody thought it was an upgrade. People were very excited. And I'll remember this forever. In the Big Ten room where they had Alford's press conference, I sat next to Glenn Worley when he was at Iowa City West, when he was considering Duke and ended up coming to Iowa. And then in the back of the room, leaned up against the wall, was Kirk Ferentz. Nobody bothered him. He was a nobody. Steve Alford was the chosen one that was going to take Iowa from being a good program to a great program. And the first couple of years sold out. The entire season sold out. Back then there were split ticket sales. You could buy it because they, like with football, that some of that, it started to wane then, and I think there was two factors more than anything: Pierre Pierce and Alford's arrogance. It rubbed people the wrong way. They couldn't believe that the situation was happening with Pierre Pierce, and then his arrogance rubbed people the wrong way. So Gary Barta overcorrected with Todd Lickliter, who showed no ego, was an all shucks, but you thought you were going to get more, in every single aspect of life, let alone basketball. And Fran, he kind of bungled the next search because they offered the job to Brian Gregory, who was taking Dayton to the NIT finals, and Brian Gregory wanted to wait, and then. So then they decided to hire Fran anyway. and Fran did a nice job of rebuilding it. No question about that. But that is also 15 years ago. He's recruiting players who weren't born then. So you do have to take that into consideration. But if they move forward, Chad, if they decide status quo, Fran's too good of a coach, we don't want to have this relationship, you've got to have a plan in place for 3 years down the road, not next year. You've got to make sure that Fran is going to continue and take this to a higher level. And that could be another assistant coach. Because frankly, when I looked at that Purdue crowd, and you got 4,756 people who had their tickets scanned, less than a third of the arena for a top 10 Purdue team, they've checked out.
Yeah.
And when people are checked out, they're not angry. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's apathy. And if people are checked out, you got to entice them with something different. And you would be enticing them with more of the same.
Man. Well, do you want to do a quick draft? We don't have a lot of time left here, so let's just go right into the draft. We're going to do a draft. Let's cut it down to 8. Okay, eight players each.
Okay.
Just so we have like an 8-man rotation. Okay. And,
all right.
I don't really care. So we're going to try to fill the 1 through 5. This is the Fran era. Okay, we're just going to kind of reflect. And there's been a lot of good things about the Fran era for sure. And so we kind of wanted to highlight some of those here with some of the best players. So 1 through 5, we got to fill 8 spots. And so I don't know. How do you want to do it? Do you want to I'll give you the first. You can have the first pick. That's fine.
You can get the first one.
Yeah, you can have the first.
To me, there's like 2 that stand out. So one of us is getting one of them is getting the other. I'm going to go with Luka Garza as my first pick. And do you want to go positionally like an 8-man rotation? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So he's your 5, right?
Yeah.
I'll save my 5 then.
Yeah. Well, I might draft the next best 5 just to be.
Yeah. There you go. Real quick, Garza. I mean, it's unfortunate that the COVID year had to be his senior year. I mean, I think Fran also gets kind of punished for that in some ways.
That's true.
Didn't get those crowds would have been enormous. I mean, Iowa was in the top 15 all year, top 10 most of the year. Obviously didn't end how you wanted it to with a second round loss to Oregon, but that was a special year. We're covering it in empty arenas. So
I thought, I mean, speaking about Garza, he is the poster child for the Fran McCaffrey era of what you can do, because he was a low 4, high 3 star guy who worked his ass off every single day. It was just relentless as a worker and pushed himself and became the best player in the country 2 years in a row. Second year was, consensus. And that is probably the saddest moment athletically I thought I observed during the COVID year was the jersey retirement for Luka Garza in a COVID year where there was nobody there to celebrate, because he would have been beloved. And can you imagine him in the NIL period? That would have been challenging in a couple of areas, but that would have been really great for him. He would have. It might have helped Fran with the engagement because Luka was just that great of a person.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa has so many good 4s. It's really hard to pick one. So I'm going to move Keegan Murray to the 3. I'll take Keegan.
All right, Keegan Murray.
The 2022 Big Ten Tournament Championship.
Yeah.
Maybe the highlight of the McCaffrey era, probably.
Yeah.
I think.
It was, for sure.
Yeah. The crowning moment.
Yeah.
See, that's the other thing I didn't even put in the story. He struggled the Big Ten tournament for many years, as you guys know. But that was kind of a big one. And one of the best parts of that was he won it with both of his sons. I mean, Patrick had a good game, and Connor had a big bucket in that Purdue championship win as well. So I think that was special for Fran. Really neat moment.
Yeah, it certainly was. And Keegan Murray, you want to talk about player, his 1 year, as great as Luka was in his final 2 years, Keegan's last year was the best. He was great. He was a difference maker because he could do it in any way you wanted him to do it. In that tournament, there's never been a better Big Ten tournament player in 1 year than him. He scored the most points and was the most impactful. Maybe Luke Brecker could make a case for that, for his heroics for that 1 year. But and then that moment was truly special. The unfortunate part I've always said about the Big Ten tournament is, here you are, you win a tournament, and if you're Michigan State or whatever, Purdue, it's like, well, yeah, whatever, we move on. But it becomes a footnote in half an hour.
It was weird covering that,
yeah. Because it's like, all right, now what? And then they were underseeded because they'd already figured out the field, and then of course what happened 4 or 5 days later.
4 days later in Buffalo, lose to Richmond in an early Thursday game.
And And when you want to look over the last 20 years, the two Big Ten tournaments they've won, 06 and that year, they both got bounced in the first round when there was a lot of momentum going. And that's really unfortunate. So we'll do this snake-wise. You take the third.
Oh, boy. Okay. Man, that's tough. I'm going to go I'll go Aaron White because he's one of my favorite all-time guys.
Yeah. He would have been mine too.
Yeah. Led Iowa's first two. I mean, obviously there was a lot of guys in that 14 team, but he was a big part of that. And then the 15, they win their last 6 games of the Big Ten season. They were 6-6 in the Big Ten. I'll never forget interviewing him at Northwestern. He was like snippy and and then he just goes on a personal tear. They go 6-0 to finish. They end up 12-6 in the Big Ten. Get a 7 seed and then blow out Davidson in the first round. Then got beat by Gonzaga. But anyway, Aaron Whitey. The only player in Iowa history to lead the program in rebounding 4 consecutive years. Wow.
He was number 2 in points scored until Luka came around. As much as Luka was, the poster child, Aaron White certainly was too, because he was much more unheralded. He was just kind of a guy. I think it was between Duquesne and Iowa, if I remember right. And yet he came here and thrived and is still playing professional basketball overseas. I would love to have seen him be a wide receiver. The way he ran the floor, he was like a deer. Yeah. And he could dunk on a 12-foot rim. I mean,
that was so crazy about him. Yeah.
Yeah. He just had crazy jumping ability and
too.
All right. Yeah. So I could talk about Aaron a lot.
No kidding. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to take my 3 here. And I'm going to go with, oh boy, this is tough. I'm going to go with Jared Uthoff at the 3.
Oh, that's sneaky because I guess he works at the 3. He works at the 3.
He could do that. And thanks to you moving Keegan.
Yeah, I know. I had to.
Jared, for the first 2/3 of that 15-16 season, was as lethal as any player in the country, was consensus second teamer, inside outside player, could really rebound, could shoot the 3, could do so many different things. When he and Whitey were together in that stretch, because they were both pretty much the tandem that they were able to get them done. Pretty phenomenal. I'm going to, you know what, just because I want to be sneaky again, I'm going to take my 4. I'm going to go with Tyler Cook.
Okay. Yep. I had him down too as a 4. Good pick.
He's very
thunderous dunker.
Yeah. Very explosive. Yeah. I would have liked to have seen one more year, what he could have been one more year, but in some ways him leaving early allowed Luka to kind of flourish. So I don't know how much of a net positive that would have been, but he was, when he was playing well, you could see the athletic ability. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, I think I'll take. I'm gonna have Devin Marble run the point.
Okay.
I want a lengthy team here, so I love Bohannon, but for now I could always put Bohannon at the 2 if I get him.
Yeah.
For now I've got Marble, but I got bench guys too I can grab. So, and then I'm gonna go with another one of my favorites. I feel like he's underrated in Hawkeye history just because he didn't end up playing for like an NCAA tournament team as a senior, but he was terrific. He led the Big Ten in scoring. Peter Jock was a great player, great shooter, one of the most pure shooters. With athleticism too. I mean, he was just so smooth when he got on, and he's still playing too. So, in fact, I saw him at one of the games recently. Gave him a little hug, and I remember doing a big story on him back in his senior year. He's from my area over here. So Peter Jock, also another one of my Fran era favorites, and you got to give Fran credit for him too, because like you said, he kind of lost a little shine coming out of high school, but Iowa stuck with him. Slow start to his career, had to get his weight figured out, but he really finished strong.
Yeah. I'm going to go my two here. I have to take the backcourt, because you took my top two backcourt players, I'll be honest with you. But then again, I cheated too. I could have taken them one there. I'm going to go in succession. I'm going to go, my number one is going to be Jordan Bohannon. And as you said so well, one of the clutchest, if not the most clutch player of the Fran McCaffrey era, or any era. When you look at the last second shots he made, of course, the Indiana shot that led them to the championship game. Remember that? That was pretty sweet. The three-pointer.
I still got it on my phone. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a pretty big deal. So assists, free throws.
Yeah.
The moment, in the worst year of the McCaffrey era, he produced the most touching moment, which was missing the free throw to preserve the record for Chris Street. It was really a emotional day. I'll say that. I think emotional for a lot of people, and so I thought that was tremendous. And then this might be a wild card, but I saw him, and I see him now. He's one of the truly great Hawkeyes, and he doesn't get his due. Mm-hmm. That's Matt Gatens.
Yeah. Good
Matt
point.
was tough as hell.
Yeah.
He sprained City High kid. Yes, little Hawks are always pretty tough, right, Jack? Yeah,
that's right.
And here's part of that. He was saddled by being recruited by Alford, playing 2 years for Licklider, and was miserable. And Fran really helped resurrect his career because he had him shave some pounds. But one of the years, I think it was Todd's last year as head coach, he sprained his ankle in shoot around, and it was bad. He shouldn't have played. But that, because they were having issues getting students to the games, they made it a free student night. Instead of sitting out, and they're playing Ohio State, instead of sitting out, he chose to stand when he would take a breather, and he fought through that, and he played a hell of a game. And then his last back half of his senior year, he was money. I mean, the back-to-back games against Indiana and Wisconsin kind of fueled the era that we saw, the kind of the rise. And then they went and they won an NIT game and then lost at Oregon in the NIT. And I think he's a special person. He's one of my favorite people. Mm-hmm. And I also say that he's going to be a remarkable head coach for somebody at some point soon. I don't know that it's his time now to be a head coach at Iowa, but it could be his time to coach somewhere else as a head coach. And I think the world of Matt. I wish him the best, and I'll take him on any team, any sport.
Great pick. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to roll with Joe Wieskamp. I'm going to stick him at the 2/3. And then I'm going to grab Chris Murray, because you got to have the Murrays playing together, right? So so Chris can play the 3 or the 4 for me. So I've got some really good depth there in the guard court, the wings. We're going to be shooting a lot of threes. We're going to be long. We're going to rebound. We're going to run. So I like it.
All right. Yeah, I see you're kind of like, it's like fantasy football when somebody runs out of quarterbacks, or it's like, I'm going to wait to the end, But all right, I'm going to take as my first 3 guy off the bench, Peyton Sanford. Mm-hmm. I think he is an exceptional player. He reminds me a lot of Matt. He's probably a little more emotional than Matt. He's longer. Of course, he's not they're built differently.
Yeah, I like
but
that.
But there's a lot to like there, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If he would have played in the era when we were back in college in the 90s, he would be a rock star on campus, and maybe he still is, and I just don't see it because I don't hang out at those places anymore. But still, I think he's in that category. With Luka Garza, at the 5. I still feel pretty secure that he could play about 40 minutes. So I'm not sure I need to really back that one up. But I do feel like I could use another guy in the backcourt who can bring up the ball, who could distribute and feed the post. And I'm going to go with Connor McCaffrey that's a good wild card there. I like that. Yeah. And I know his teammates liked him. I know he's going to be a good coach. And I know he's a well-respected player, and he certainly proved that by how he helped feed his teammates, and especially the post feed. So
a legendary post feeder, and played the 4, played the 1. You don't see many guys that can do that. Certainly.
Yeah.
So I got two picks left. What's that?
2 picks left.
These are my last 2. So I need another guy that brings the ball up the court. Tough call here between Mike Gesell and Josh Dix. Gesell, more of a pure point guard, plays good defense, but I really like Josh Dix too. I mean, I think he's just a phenomenal player. So I'm just going to keep the shots coming. So I'm going to go Josh Dix.
Okay.
Over Mike Gesell. No offense to you, Mike. I'm just looking for just all kinds of scoring here, and I think Josh can play just a fantastic point anyway. And I don't have any 5s, so I'm going to have to move. But this guy's going to rim protect for me. Underappreciated Adam Woodbury.
Yeah.
You look at Iowa's best defensive teams under Fran. They've had 3 of them, all of them with Adam Woodbury at center. And that makes a big difference in there. So we're going to plug him in at the 5. He's not going to poke any eyes. He's going to play just real solid defense and let everyone else score.
Absolutely. He was very much underappreciated because he didn't score. Because that wasn't his forte, but defensively he was peerless when it came to the Fran era, and you saw it. He rim protected, he defended very, very well. He had to defend against some really good posts. Frank Kaminsky all the time, it felt like. So I thought he was tremendously undervalued as well, and I really liked him over time. You took Dix, and that's the guy that I was debating with Connor McCaffrey. Do I want to have a shooter or not? And
one spot left, I believe.
I know, and there's like a couple of different directions I'm thinking so strongly about. Do I want the lockdown defender in the backcourt?
Yeah.
Sap. Do I want a distributor with Mike Gesell, who's pretty fast?
Still there, yeah. He's a good defender too.
Yeah, I think
Basabi.
so.
Well, Basabi was on my list.
That's the one I was leading towards. But I think I could use somebody who's explosive. And when I explosive, I mean a thunderous dunker who was the captain of a team that went all the way to the finals in New York, way back when. A guy named Eric May.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason why is, I mean, I'd be happy with any of that guys, frankly. Gabe Olaseni was one that I was thinking about if I needed a backup. But I got Luka Garza. I don't need a backup at that position. And I really thought about Basabi as well. But Eric May, an explosive player, because my backcourt has a lot of strengths, but it's not necessarily, like you got Devin Marble. And so you've got Keegan Murray. So I kind of need somebody who's I need somebody who's tough, who can defend, and who's explosive. So I thought, as far as picking a team goes, Eric May would be my guy.
So my final roster is Marble, Dix, Jock, Wieskamp, Murray, White, and Woodbury. Yeah. What'd you end up with?
Luka Garza, Jordan Bohannon, Matt Gatens, Jared Utah, Tyler Cook, Peyton Sanford, Connor McCaffrey, and Eric May.
Yeah, that'd be a good game. Good game. We could have gone 10 deep, but we're running long here for 8.
Yeah.
So anyway, good stuff. Let's hear about the Big Ten SEC Summit on next week's Legends and Listeners. We'll be down to maybe like one Iowa women's game left potentially. I can't. We're getting down to the end here, folks. This basketball season, so a lot of stuff's going to be happening. Good show, Scott.
All right. Thanks for having me, Chad.
Safe travel to New Orleans.
Thank you.
For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. Hope you enjoyed this Tuesday episode. Legends and Listeners back with you next Thursday from the Channel Seed Studios, only on Iowa Everywhere.